Good evening. Welcome to the new school. My name is Karen Kooni. I'm the director of the Viralist Center for Art and Politics, and I've had the pleasure over the last, I think, 10 years of producing or presenting the Public Art Fund talks at the new school in collaboration with the Public Art Fund, which has for many, many years brought really stellar international artists to the new school. So thank you again tonight for a wonderful collaboration. Tonight we're hearing from Abraham Cruzvilleagas about a series of works on autoedificación or construcción, and I am very curious to see to what extent that affords an agency to objects and material that extends far beyond the aesthetics. So I am pleased now to welcome Andrea Hickey, the Associate Curator of the Public Art Fund, who will introduce Abraham, and afterwards we'll have a Q&A as always. So thank you all for coming. Andrea, please come.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming tonight on a gloomy Wednesday evening. I'm bearing with the rain. As Karen said, I'm Andrea Hickey. I'm the Associate Curator at Public Art Fund. And I want to start by thanking our team here, Karen and Pam Tillis, for your collaboration with us on this very exciting ongoing program. As Karen mentioned, Public Art Fund hosts a series of artist talks in collaboration with the Viralist every season. We invite 3 artists to speak about their work solo on stage with a framework thinking about the public realm and what it means to present artworks in that very complicated context. In September, we welcomed Jeff Koons to a sold-out crowd on the occasion of his new work, Split Rocker, which was installed at Rockefeller Center this past month and during the summer. On Wednesday, November 11th, we'll welcome Sam Falls, whose exhibition Light Over Time is now on view at Metrotech Center in downtown Brooklyn. So you can check that out in advance of the talk next month. Tonight, I'm very excited to introduce Abraham Cruzvilleagas as the second speaker of the series this season. Abraham and I have known each other for a couple of years now, and I've had the pleasure of speaking with him at length about his thinking on these ideas of autoconstrucción. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing his take on that tonight. Based in Mexico City, Abraham is one of the most important conceptual artists of his generation. His diverse practice has included sculpture, installation, film, and performance, and he's utilized found objects, assemblage, and improvisation throughout that diverse group of media. Solo exhibitions of Abraham's work have been presented in institutions worldwide, including the Haus der Kunst Munich, Walker Art Center, Modern Art Oxford, the New Museum, and opening next week at the Fundación UMEX in Mexico City, Abraham will have a major solo exhibition. So we're especially lucky tonight to have him here away from his installation period. Abraham's represented by Curry Monzuto in Mexico City, Regan Projects in Los Angeles, and Chantal Crucel Gallery in Paris. Abraham's 10-year body of work entitled Autoconstruction, or self-building, is really at the heart of his practice. For Abraham, the idea of autoconstruction involves an improvised approach to domestic architecture and urban development. Informed by the development of his childhood neighborhood in the south of Mexico City, this idea is both personal and political for Abraham, and it's deeply connected to the idea of public and private space. Built beyond the boundaries of the urban plan on a hillside of volcanic rock, this self-made neighborhood required an approach to building, materials, and community solidarity that has served as both a metaphor and a methodology for Cruzvillegas' ongoing approach to art making. So I'm very excited to hear more about Abraham's thoughts on autoconstruction, particularly as it relates to producing artworks in public space. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Abraham Cruzvilleagas to the stage.
Hello. Thank you very much. In fact, tonight I will not speak that much about my own work in terms of Autoconstrucción. I've been developing a series of exhibitions, projects, music, film, theater, and many other things, standing on the platform of this concept of Autoconstrucción that Andrea already spoke a little bit about. And, but in fact, I want to address more my particular subjective, arbitrary, capricious perception of the use of public space. And so I will do so. I was born in 1968, and maybe you know, in 1968, we held in Mexico the Olympic Games. And during that time, there was a big social and political struggle because of authoritarianism from the government. And maybe the largest of the demonstration by students in a big square called Tlatelolco, a historical square where you can see together colonial buildings, Aztec remnants, and contemporary buildings by Mario Pani, architect Mario Pani. They took the square to demonstrate against the government acts of repression against professors, doctors, and students, and they killed many of them. Many were taken to prisons illegally, kidnapped. Many were just disappeared, missing. We still want them to be presented. And so it was kind of the beginning of a new age for Mexico, my country, dark ages for my country. That didn't stop yet. 2 weeks ago, some 40-something students were kidnapped by the government in the state of Guerrero. And nobody knows where they are. They are students to become professors at the Escuela Normal in Guerrero, in the state of Guerrero, in the west of Mexico. They are still missing. A week after, they found an illegal graveyard with many bodies, dismembered bodies. But it happened that it's not the students' bodies. And then they found another illegal graveyard with more bodies. And they kept finding more and more illegal graveyards. And they don't know where the students are yet. So that's why I'm saying that the authoritarianism and repressive attitude of the government has not finished yet. Anyways, this is a parenthesis. In 1968, as part of the Olympic Games, they organized an Olympic cultural encounter, an international gathering of artists. And they invited them to propose sculptures for the public space in a brand new highway called Periférico that ran, and it still runs around the south of the city. So many artists, like the one you are looking at, this work is by Herbert Bayer, an American artist. They invited artists from, it seems that we are kind of in a Studio 45 or something. It's not bad, but anyways. I hope it's not distracting you. So this Olympic committee invited some 18 or 20 artists from abroad, from Morocco, from Europe, from South America, from Mexico as well. And they made this group of sculptures around the Periférico, this highway, and it was called La Ruta de la Amistad, the route of friendship, as a sign of joy and happiness in the time of struggle, in fact. So you can see this image from Life magazine, in which they used, let's say, these sculptures as sites for showing internationally the progress and the democratic spirit of the Mexican government that wasn't. Outside Aztec Stadium, or Estadio Azteca, that was not new, but kind of newish, they also had some guest invites, like Alexander Calder, who made this beautiful stabile sculpture called the Red Sun. And it's still there. And as many other sculptures from the Ruta de la Amistad, they are still there, but the landscape changed a lot in 46 years. That is my age now. And it was, by then, it was just the kind of a countryside landscape. There was nothing around the sculptures. It was the modern language of art, like using the public space in a very new city, in a way, even when it's, of course, a very old city, a very old environment before the colonial times. But this area of the city, which is made by volcanic rock, was completely empty. So they made new this highway and this project of art for that. Where I was born and where I grew up was not far from this area, in a, as I said, volcanic rock land, and people started making their houses. They took the land illegally, first of all, and then they started making their houses in a very random way, without money. People, immigrants from the countryside, following the promise of progress and the promise of modernity and democracy. And then they have to struggle, they have to fight to get the property of the land and to get the services like water, electricity, sewage, and so on. And, but the city, as the country, changed a lot. And so the social tissue in that community where I grew up got very strong, and against all those acts of authoritarianism, but also the landscape of the city changed a lot. They started building lots of shopping malls, stores, hospitals, banks, and residential buildings and so on. More recently, they built a second level of the highway, which you can see in the right. It's called the segundo piso, second floor. And so it also affected a lot these sculptures in the landscape, like hiding them or even canceling them in the long term. Some, I think, are not so bad. But anyways, the optimism of the project was almost immediately canceled by the rapid growth of the city and the invasion of human around there. And so, not so recently, well, in particular, this one is by an artist from Uruguay called Ernesto Fonseca. I want to talk about this briefly. It's another parenthesis. All of these sculptures were abandoned in time by the government and whoever was in charge of them. And so they went really bad, like in bad condition. And so sometimes this one, like this one, some of them were squat by people. So people lived inside there. Like it happens under the rail tracks or under bridges or, like it happens a lot here. Yesterday and today I've been visiting lots of places with Andrea, looking for a place to make an artwork where these things still happen, like homeless people look for a shelter and they use what they can. So this one was used by some people for years, and suddenly police took them off, and then an artist took it as an exhibition site, inviting artists to make projects inside this sculpture called La Torre de los Vientos, the Wind Tower. The name of this artist is Pedro Reyes, and he was kind of a smart guy, like using the place as an alternative to institutions and so. Parenthesis. I like the way many times people use these places as graffiti formats, you know, like canvases, or just urinaries, or, you know, like they serve, so they have a use. And public art has provides this service constantly. And it's very important, I think, in a society to have places like this. As I was saying, not so recently, I made a research on public art, or art for public spaces, and I published a book, a homemade book, called La Ruta de la Enemistad, like the route of enmity, as opposed to the route of friendship from '68. And I asked friends, artists, and curators, but also ordinary people, friends, just friends, to tell me the places in Mexico City they liked the least, the most horrible places to visit in Mexico City. And this was the champion. That is, I mean, it's easy to just to point at something that is already bad, you know? It's like kicking a coffin. And, I mean, it's okay, but it's still something that stands there. And originally, the sculpture was commissioned to an artist whose name is Sebastian, who's a very smart artist who knows a lot about quantum and about fractals. And, but he developed this kind of language of geometry, abstract geometry, but that is not, at the end, is not so abstract. It's figurative and so on. And it's, as you can see, the scale with the light. It's monumental, but monstrously monumental. And it became a reference of, for the city, you like it or not. And then people pointed at many other like public works, public art that's been for years, and also buildings, not only art like sculptures or statues or, you know, but also like these futurist, modernist buildings that are still there. This is the monument to Rufino Tamayo. This is, yeah, well. Some friends pointed at, how you say, corporations, buildings, banks, churches. Some just pointed at their own houses, for instance. But also still this, you know, the kind of art that is decorating, or it's meant to decorate or to provide a service to people in the street in terms of giving a meaning in order to enjoy their experience of the public space or the public sphere. And I think it's important to think again about all these kind of things. This is maybe one of the most popular artworks in Mexico City now. And it's by an artist called Jorge Marin. And people stand there and they take pictures every day, thousands of pictures, just standing in front of these wings. So it's kind of a toy for the people. So it kind of makes the work. It's okay. But it's still something I have questions about. Like, is it necessary to provide a service that way or not? In Monterrey, it's not specifically this one, but in the city of Monterrey, in the north of the country, in north of Mexico, they've been using one of these large-scale sculptures to drop heads of cartel members as you know, like garbage bins. It's a gigantic garbage bin, and so it works. This is called the fountain of the ejaculating snakes. And as it happens, it doesn't ejaculate at all. Normally, it should drop some water. So I made this book called La Ruta de la Enemistad, and I collected some of the words. This is International Airport in Mexico City. Maybe you know it. You've been there. This is the American Embassy. Then, I don't know, I've been like thinking about this and wondering how to make use, a different use or a personal, maybe again, arbitrary, capricious, subjective use of the public space. Then 4 years ago, I started a project with friends in the street. It's called La Galería de Comercio. And I just asked, I called some younger friends, artists, to make or to propose art projects, or not necessarily art, but projects, ideas in the public space in the neighborhood where I used to live until recently. And then we took the street every month to organize like a couple of hours event every month, very simple things that would not produce objects, would not use any budget, would not ask for permission to the authorities, from the authorities, would not damage or hurt the square or its inhabitants, like animal, plant, any possible kind of existence there, or even persons, and not to accumulate, not to store, not to sell, not to buy, but only using the energy of the street as it is. Then we had different events. This was maybe the second one, organized by Damian Ortega with his publishing house, Alias. That is, he publishes books that are not available in Spanish that he wants to read because he didn't speak English formally, so he wanted to know. And then he started translating himself, well, asking friends to help to translate the books he liked to read. And then he started publishing books, very cheap and with his own money. So he presented the books he already published by then, 4 years ago, with a musical event along with Manuel Rocha, a composer from Mexico City. And they sold the books there. And so it was very, very nice and very simple. This was a journey of clapping since sunrise to dawn to night, until night. So it was kind of a constant performance during all day long. This was an archive that we invited artists and curators to provide, to give us the documents of projects, unrealized projects, refused mostly projects by institutions or galleries. So it was an archive available for everybody to read. And of course, we got also some projects we ourselves rejected. As the name of the project, by the way, sorry, it's called, it was La Galería de Comercio. And the name was after the name of the street. It was in Comercio Street, in the corner of Comercio and José Martí streets in Colonia Escandón, kind of central Mexico City. This was a broadcast of illegal radio stations in Mexico, not illegal, but like independent illegal radio stations, and then it was for everybody to listen to them. And this was a soccer match in the street organized by young art students from the neighbor city of Puebla. This was a free mail office for one day. So this girl, she received all kind of letters, and she delivered them for free, but she had the right to change the letters, so adding or removing parts of the letter or canceling, and then delivering them to the addresses provided as well. This was a journey on promotion of human rights, because in Mexico, maybe you know, there's still a lot of domestic violence, for instance, and violence against journalists and violence against human rights defenders. This was Dia de los Muertos. Maybe you heard about it. It's kind of a celebration of the death. But it is normally in November, first days of November, but this was held on the Independence Day in Mexico, which is September 16, and they were, this Group D, or Group D, Grupo D, where they were celebrating or commemorating the assassination of people during the drug war in the period of President Felipe Calderón. So they shown these black flags, and they made an altar, a shrine for the death, trying to write down all the names of people that were murdered or killed or who died during this drug war. They organized a parade. This is the corner where we have, normally things happen in this crossing. There is a school, that building is a school, but in front of that there is a pharmacy, there is a bar, and there is a store. So there is lots of activity and energy, an energy flow that is very important and interesting. We had like film screenings, like this is Jennifer Bornstein, a film she shot in California. We had a street game journey, playing with children, but not like really helping them, but just having them doing whatever they wanted to do. We got some music also, like street musicians that were invited to perform there and to organize some kind of contest. This is another film screening. This was Genaro Lopez activity, who presented this workshop of recycling car tires for making pots and other crafts. So he was not really teaching people how to make them, but just trying maybe just to show that you can do things with found objects that are still alive. And in general, I think the will of the project was more like not necessarily to have people making things there, but to show them that they can do something in their own very corner at home. That it's not necessary, because we had like we received like proposals to make a large graffiti project there. And we said, why don't you do it in your own corner, you know, in your own street? You don't have to do it here. And so that was more our will, like trying to discuss about this use of the public space in the street, and not necessarily in the urban context, but everywhere. And then this became the most important activity of the Galería de Comercio. The Galería de Comercio was organized by 7 artists in total. We were originally Nuria Montiel and me, and then it was Jimena Mendoza, José Luis Cortés Santander, María Cerdá Cebrón, Alejandra España, Martín Núñez, and me. And we just finished our activities a couple of months ago, because everybody has things to do. But we organized a closing project at Casa del Lago, an institution, just showing the archives of everything we did there, like this dancing party, like inviting people just to dance in the street, just to use the street. as it normally happens in other places in Mexico, like they organize parties in the street using a sound system, and people closes the street just to use the space. And so this was the kind of activities we did, like this sticker club where people were invited to make like drawings on sticker paper and then exchanging the stickers, and invited to stick some or to post them in some in the streets. We had like this independent label for music, selling their music, and with a, like music. This was a recycling paper event, like recovering all the paper from ads and flyers from the local commerces and stores, and then making a large carpet that we removed after 2 hours of use, that it was almost destroyed. So when I talk about this project, I never refer to it as an artwork of mine, but a collaborative thing that I organized with artists that we really wanted to use the space in the street as something, kind of an activity, a pretext activity to be together. That would be what I can say, you know, like just thinking that you can spend some time together with people, sharing time, sharing energy. You sometimes have to put some money, but it's important to make things together. And this I learned since I was very young in many different places and contexts, as I did with other younger friends when I was like 17 or 18 years old. We shared a space with artist Gabriel Orozco in Mexico City, just sharing a space at his studio every weekend, every Friday, just talking about things we were interested on, and without any academic purpose or economic interest or profit, but just spending time together, growing up together. And I think that's the best way you can share and you can do things. So I kept doing things like that since I was young, and I think that's what makes me feel very proud and very aware that making art can be political without making pamphlets and without making propaganda. And nowadays that we are facing this so hard situation in my country, but I think as we are doing all around the world, I mean, one of the worst, I mean, the most dangerous cities in the world is in Mexico. But also they talk about Kabul, and they talk about Islamabad, and they talk about other cities in the world. So we can do things in these situations out of nothing. We can do things out of any resources, or as my father used to say it, with resources, without resources, and in spite of the resources. So this is the way I think we can approach also the public space and the public sphere. So to raise more questions about our situation without making propaganda, but enjoying and spending time together. And this is a capital. It's not that not producing object is not producing capital. In fact, this is the most or the richest capital you can produce ever. This particular event I like is organized by Martin Núñez, and it's called Wall Ride is My Way. And he wrote the wall with his friend, skateboard artist, making a joint drawing on the wall by skating on it. So he just constructed this little structure. He calls it a transition, which is beautiful. I love the way he calls it. Maybe in English it's a different word, but I don't know. It should be translated as a transición. And this is beautiful because he made by hand una transición, a transition into something. And then he asked his friends to make something together on the wall, a mural, properly. And then we cleaned it out. Thank you very much.
Hi, thanks, Abraham. We'll take some questions from people. Would you like to be here or up? maybe if you're up here, then we can pass the microphone around. Oh, sorry, the feedback is a bit bad. So that was a very interesting lecture about the history of public art in Mexico City. I think a lot of us saw a lot of artworks for the first time. I'm really curious to hear about, I mean, we've been talking a lot about sculpture in public space and how a sculpture might be a service or not a service. And there's a huge contrast in what you're doing in this project you just talked to us about so eloquently. And I wonder if you have thought about what the power might be behind these large sculptures, if they held any power for you, in even if they might be, you know, also kind of this discarded form in some ways, or, you know, can be seen quite negatively if there's a different kind of power that they hold in their presence or in how people interact with them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, of course, there is power in a very single gesture of art. So mostly, I mean, it's more visible or more evident when you do something monumental, or these large-scale things we have in Mexico that are still there, and they still making them. I mean, they still make, they still take decisions in bureaucratic offices to produce urban ornament as they think about it. I think that's my perception, and that includes lots of power and lots of. I mean, in terms of budget, in terms of decisions, who take them and how. In particular, I think that we grew up, my generation, we grew up in our youth with these large-scale sculptures by Sebastian. He would be the kind of the emblem of these large-scale things that represent the power of the state. Mostly during the period of President Salinas de Gortari, who he himself represents a shift in a transition a transition in the power into what is called neoliberalism in Mexico. And it means, of course, an economic approach. It's not a naive concept. And I think, I don't really know a person who likes his work, because it means an arbitrary imposition, not only to the public space, but to our everyday life. And all the economic shift, it means that. But I insist, that's an emblem, and it's easy to talk about that in a bad way.
Right.
Or, yeah, like just pointing at that, like saying, yeah, that's the enemy. But there are many other ways of making art, like using or misusing power, that are not necessarily monumental. It can be a conceptual artwork, even. It can be a performance artwork.
Right.
So, yeah, it depends.
Yeah. So let's take some questions from the audience. If you can just wait for a microphone to be passed and raise your hand.
Thank you very much, Abraham. That was really fascinating. You drew very convincingly the tie to the incidents of violence in 1968 and what's happening today in terms of oppression by the government. How does that affect the public space? And how is the work shaped and formed today happening in public space differently from what was possible in 68, or has it not changed?
Well, honestly, I think it's a very good question, but it's hard because I think the intention of the government at that time, I would say it was a good intention. It was a nice thing to propose this cultural encounter, and there were many other things, like choreographers and musicians and many things, but that stayed for, I don't know if it's forever, but if it's still there. And it means something as a reminder, for me at least, of this change in society. And I think, yeah, like students who were part of the movement in 1968, they produced a parallel project that was stronger, I would say, at that moment. And it's still there to be studied deeply. Maybe there are some PhD theses about them, but I don't know. And it's all the prints they made as flyers for the movement, for the student movement. And many of them, of course, they were anonymous because they feared being caught and being imprisoned or killed or tortured, as many did by then. But I can name one that I know very well and I admire, and who has one of the best archives of these prints that were, yeah, they were asking young people to participate and to be part of something that historically became, I think, one of the most important things that happened in my country. Arnulfo Aquino is the author of of many of these images that you maybe know in these posters made for the movement. And he kept many of the original printing, the wood blocks. And he kept also many prints. And I mean, he's kind of a discreet guy, but he's there, and I think he's much more important than, I mean, his work, his discreet work is more important than any of these monumental works in the public space. But his work, as his peers during those days, is also part of the public space or public art practice. And as it was for the French Revolution in its time, its moment. But I think, of course, things changed a lot, and now things must change. I think there are some small groups of younger artists doing things like the cooperative Curator Invertido. They are doing something now, and they are kind of rebellious and a bit narcissistic, but they are doing things well because they know they are, I mean, they are more activists than artists, but they are participating of this discussion as well. And so I think it's important to name them also.
Hi. Well, first of all, I'm really glad you mentioned the students that disappeared in Mexico 2 weeks ago. And then also at the beginning of the lecture, you said that you were not going to talk about the Autoconstrucción series, but then you showed kind of like this gallery that you constructed. So I was wondering if you see this as part of like constructing your own art world of like, or like if you see that now there are ways to like stepping outside of the art world and constructing your own little spaces.
I don't know. I think I mean, I hope I understood your question or your comment. And I think most of the work related to the idea of autoconstruction, it's related to the idea of how we do construct our own identity. So more than translating it as self-building, I would say self-constructing, which is the construction of the self. That way, I think it's something, as Marcel Duchamp would say, is something definitely unfinished, as the houses are. Autoconstruction houses are definitely unfinished. They are still waiting for something, transformation, I mean. So it's about permanent transformation. That way, I think, the way I make my work, it's trying to produce more questions about who I am, where I come from, why, what for. And these events in general, I think, that affect us every day are important, and then we can keep producing some language in crisis, you know, like putting our own ideas of what we are and who we are in crisis, like making questions again. And then I think it's the only way. My sculptural work is not really giving any message or content. It's not communicating, in fact. For me, it's more the evidence of my failure in terms of communication, which I like. But I think it's also my right to include all these experiences, energy, information in my work, but not as a theme or as a content in a literal or didactic way. So I think it's very important to mention what's happening now in Iguala and Guerrero in Mexico, because it's not only there, it's the whole country, it's really bad, but the whole world is really bad. And then as humans, we have the responsibility, not only the right, but also the responsibility to think about all these events, but individually again. And then we can participate of our own communities in a more sincere way. And that's what I try to do.
So one of the things that struck me most about the juxtaposition of the monumental public sculptures and then your work in the sort of ad hoc public displays of art was that the monumental were very permanent, whereas what you were doing has a very temporary nature to it. Like you said, you erased this particular skateboard mural here. Could you talk a little bit about why this ephemerality or this sense of being able to erase the work is important to the work itself, if it is?
In fact, I think everything is ephemeral, you know? Like all these monumental sculptures are also, I mean, sometimes for good. They've been damaged by the environment and by Dove's shit, and or weather or light. I mean, all of us, we are in constant transformation. That's what I mean. Again, it's more about, in a way, referring in a silly manner to Taoism, that we are only in the way permanently. And then these large things are also changing, and their landscape changed, their environment, I mean, their surroundings, but also physically they are decaying. And I mean, it's a very slow process, but I hope they will disappear in time. Not all of them. No, I mean, it's of course, it's a bit silly what I'm saying, but I think everything is ephemeral, and nothing is as important, you know? Maybe that's the point, in a way. But also, I think, like little subtle gestures by an artist can be maybe more revolutionary than these large-scale things, or as transforming or challenging. So this is more about the intention and the power, I would say. Maybe that's the right word, as Andrea asked, like, what's power? What it means in an artwork or in a gesture like this. And sometimes it's just, when these things are just decorating, it's okay, but I mean, sometimes it's not, they can transform people by joy. Why not? I don't know. Like the large swordfish sculpture that I shown you, or I mean those could mean something. In Campeche there is a huge, really monstrous sculpture of an indigenous guy, an Indian, a Maya Indian, like breaking the land, like coming out from the land. And it's about emancipation from slavery and so on. But the local people in Campeche City, they call it el atorado, the guy who was like stuck there, you know, like a, so interpretation can also transform these things. There is a beautiful picture of Robert Smithson, who also approached the public space in a particular way, sitting on the hand of these large-scale sculptures. You check it in the Yucatan, in Campeche. So he was making a statement about that, maybe. So, yeah. Oh my God.
Here we go.
Just to finish, maybe I'll be curious to how, I mean, you are here because you are searching for a space or thinking in a project for New York. we have seen what you have done in Mexico, the different aspects, different strategies with other people, alone, etc. We know your work. But I'm curious, I mean, how are you going to approach the city here? Because a lot of the things you mentioned in terms of modern public sculpture are problems that we have in New York. A lot of moments of crisis, of demonstrations in the city, those are problems that we have in New York too. I mean, those problems that we face in Mexico are the problems that modernity and the contemporary world are facing in different ways, and that public art is trying to solve.
Yeah.
And lately in New York, public art has very similar problems than Mexico has. So do you have any thoughts about it? I mean, how you are going to do it? What is going to be your projects?
Of course not. But, but I mean, at least, and not only these days, but from before, I've been thinking about all these problems or things, I mean, issues that raise when you approach the public space, because, of course, now there are kind of commonplaces that are already there every day in this kind of discussions, from large, monumental, minimalist sculptures, just to mention a work, or maybe some works that you might remember that were or are here in this city. But also the different approaches by artists in this way. I mean, what I don't want is to be self-referential in terms of the language of art. I mean, it's not that I will ignore what happened, like, let's say, Tilted Arc, for instance, just to mention one case. But there are many other examples, and I think it's just that I'm aware of this, and I want to do something maybe contradictory, maybe capricious again, maybe unstable conceptually, physically, but it would be coherent with my practice. I mean, I didn't show some other works of mine that I've been doing in the public space, like giving performances, music performances in cities like Glasgow, Oxford, or Berlin. And also, I don't know, I mean, there are many possibilities, and this wide range of things I can do here is very, very challenging. And I'm very, very happy to and excited to approach the city, a city that I think I know, because I've been here, I've been visiting here, I mean, since a while. Like, I came the first time maybe in the late 80s, sorry. And it's been changing a lot, the city, I mean, and myself as well. And I told Nicolas yesterday that I think I know the city, but in fact, right now that I'm visiting and looking for specific sites for making an artwork, of course my gaze changes, and it's been changing, and I hope I can transform my own, my own gaze and my own attitude toward the city and toward the people, and maybe I would make something that can lead me to some research and some joy and learning, mostly. And then the product, we'll see. You tell me.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. So thank you so much, Abraham, for your talk this evening.